People said moving was supposed to be a new beginning, a fresh start. My name is Catherine Reynolds. I was 42 years old when I packed up the life I had built in that house. 20 years. That was how long I had lived there. 20 years of memories, laughter, and heartbreak, all sealed away in boxes. But standing there, surrounded by all those pieces of my past, it didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like an ending. Before we go on, note that this video contains mature themes. If you find discussions about cheating, betrayal, and the emotional complexities of relationships to be distressing or uncomfortable, now would be the appropriate time to exit this video. But if you stay, I promise you that this story will stay with you long after it ends. If you want to grasp what happened in this video, you first need to understand me, my life, my decisions, and the people who molded me into the person I became. Vincent, my son, had come home that weekend to help me. He was 22, an adult with a life of his own. But in that house, I still saw the little boy who used to sneak into my bed after a nightmare, who left his toys scattered everywhere, who once told me I was the most beautiful woman in the world when he was just 6 years old. God, where has the time gone? We had spent the entire day sorting through old things, deciding what to keep and what to throw away. It was exhausting, but in a way, it had been nice. Just the two of us again. We laughed a lot that day. Found old photo albums, letters from when he was in school, even that ridiculous lamp his father had insisted was a statement piece. I should have thrown it out years ago, but I never did. Just like I never let go of so many things I probably should have. I had met Vincent's father when I was young. Too young. We had believed love would be enough to hold us together. It wasn't. By the time Vincent was 5, the marriage was over. And from that point on, it had just been me and him. No roadmap, no instructions. Just a young mother trying to raise a boy the best way she knew how. I wouldn't lie, it had been hard. There were nights when I had cried myself to sleep, nights when I had felt like I was failing him. But through it all, we had each other. That bond, that unshakable connection between a mother and her son, was what kept me going. And maybe that was why that day had felt so hard. Because once I moved out of that house, that chapter of our lives would truly be over. I had tried dating after the divorce. Some relationships lasted a little while. Some ended before they even started. But nothing had ever stuck. Eventually, I stopped trying. Being alone became easier, simpler, safer. And there I was, about to move to a new city, and I couldn't help but wonder, what was next for me? What did I even want? For so many years, my life had revolved around being a mother. But now, Vincent had his own life. His own apartment. His own future. And for the first time in a long time, I had to figure out who I was outside of being his mom. That night, my friends had thrown me a little farewell party. Vincent had practically pushed me out the door, saying I deserved a night out. Maybe he had been right. Maybe I had needed to let go, just for a little while. Have a drink. Laugh. Forget that in just a few days, that house would be empty, and I would be waking up in a place that didn't yet feel like home. So, I had gone. I had put on a smile. I had pretended I wasn't overwhelmed by all of it. And when I came back, that house had been quiet again. Just me, those boxes, and the weight of everything I hadn't said out loud. The drive home felt longer than usual. The party had been fine, good friends, warm smiles, drinks flowing as they reminisced about old times. I laughed, nodded along, and even let myself enjoy it for a while. But the whole time, I kept glancing at the clock, feeling a pull back to the house. Maybe it was the exhaustion from the day, or maybe it was the quiet thought lingering in the back of my mind that this might be one of the last nights Vincent and I spent in this house together. I pulled into the driveway earlier than planned. The house was dark except for a faint glow coming from Vincent's bedroom window. I figured he was still awake, probably finishing up packing like he said he would. The house felt heavier as I stepped inside, like the air itself carried the weight of all the years we had lived here. I didn't turn on the lights. I knew this house well enough to move through it blind. The scent of old books, wooden floors, and the faintest trace of Vincent's cologne lingered in the air. As I walked past the living room, my mind drifted back to when he was little, running through these halls, back to when I would tuck him into bed after a long day, back to a time when things were simpler. Then I saw him. At first, I didn't even register what I was looking at. My brain refused to process it. Vincent was sitting on the edge of his bed, completely unaware of my presence. His posture was tense, his head slightly bowed, his breathing uneven. The glow from his bedside lamp cast long shadows across the walls. I froze. A rush of emotions hit me all at once: confusion, embarrassment, something deeper that I couldn't name. My feet felt glued to the floor, and my heart was pounding in my chest. I wanted to move, to turn around and pretend I hadn't seen anything, but I couldn't. It was as if I had stepped outside of time, trapped in a moment that stretched unbearably long. Then, before I could stop myself, I spoke. "Vincent?" His head snapped up. His eyes met mine, wide and filled with something I couldn't quite read: shock, maybe even fear. For a moment, neither of us moved. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. "What are you doing up?" I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. He swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. "I was just tired from today. Was about to go to bed." A simple answer, but his voice was off, strained, uneasy. The air between us felt wrong. I nodded, pretending to accept it. "All right. Just wanted to check in before I went to bed." I turned away before he could respond. My steps felt slow and deliberate as I walked out of the room and down the hall to mine. My hands were cold, my skin prickling with something I didn't understand. The moment should have passed. It should have been nothing, just an awkward encounter, a fleeting second in time that we both moved on from. But lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I knew that wasn't true. Because something had shifted. And no matter how much I tried to push it away, I couldn't shake the feeling that things would never be the same again. I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of something I couldn't quite name pressing down on my chest. My mind kept circling back to that moment. The look on Vincent's face. The silence that stretched between us. The way my own body had frozen, refusing to move, refusing to react the way I should have. I should have turned away sooner. I should have knocked before stepping inside. I should have something, but I didn't. And now the memory of it clung to me, wrapping itself around my thoughts like tangled vines, refusing to let go. What was wrong with me? A mother shouldn't feel this unsettled by a simple mistake, by an awkward moment that should have meant nothing. And yet, here I was, my stomach twisting, my thoughts running wild. Had I invaded his privacy? Or had I seen something I wasn't supposed to? I rolled onto my side, gripping the blanket tighter around me. The house felt too quiet. The weight of the past, of everything that had brought us to this moment, seemed to fill the empty spaces between the walls. Vincent had always been my world. From the moment he was born, it had been just the two of us. His father, Harvey, was never much of a presence. There in name only, disappearing the moment things got hard. I had raised Vincent alone and poured everything I had into making sure he never felt the absence that I did. And maybe, just maybe, that was the problem. Had I held him too close? Had I blurred the lines between mother and son without even realizing it? I thought back to the years we spent in this house. The late nights when he was little, curling up beside me on the couch when he couldn't sleep. The way he used to confide in me, telling me everything, his dreams, his fears, his heartbreaks. Even when he grew older, when most boys started pulling away from their mothers, Vincent never did. I had loved that about him. I loved that I never felt alone. But had I leaned on him too much? Had I let my loneliness seep into the way I raised him, making him feel like he had to fill a space that was never meant for him? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push the thoughts away. It was ridiculous. I was overthinking this. I was tired. The day had been long, my emotions were running high, and I just needed sleep. Tomorrow, everything would be fine. But as the hours dragged on, I knew I was lying to myself. The next morning, the house felt different. The air was thick, heavy with something unspoken. Vincent and I moved through the kitchen like two strangers who had suddenly forgotten how to exist in the same space. "Did you sleep okay?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Yeah," he answered quickly, not looking at me. He grabbed a cup from the cabinet, filling it with water, his movements stiff, rehearsed. I watched him carefully, waiting for some sign that everything was normal. But I saw it, the way his shoulders tensed, the way he kept his eyes down, the way the usual ease between us had been replaced with something I couldn't quite name. He was pretending. And I was too. "I'll probably leave in a bit," he said after a moment. "Got some stuff to do back home before the week starts." I nodded, stirring my coffee even though I had no intention of drinking it. "Of course. Whenever you're ready." Silence. Not the comfortable kind we used to share. This was something else. Something fragile. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to reach across the space between us and say something, anything, to make it feel normal again. But what was there to say? We had both seen something last night. And no matter how much we pretended, neither of us could unsee it. The silence between Vincent and me lingered long after he left that morning. I told myself it was for the best. Some things are better left unspoken. But as the day dragged on, the weight of it sat heavy in my chest, pressing down with every breath. I kept busy, moving from room to room, finishing the last of the packing. But no matter what I did, my mind kept pulling me back. Not just to last night, but to something deeper, something older. I thought about my childhood. My parents were strict, distant, cold. My father was the type of man who believed discipline was love and that silence was strength. My mother? She was a shadow. Present but never really there. I don't remember ever hearing "I love you" in our house. Affection wasn't something we gave freely. It was something you earned, something rare, something fragile. So, I grew up craving warmth. I wanted to be the kind of mother that mine never was. I wanted Vincent to know he was loved, to never doubt it for a second. I wanted to give him the closeness I never had. Maybe that's where I went wrong. Because now, looking back, I realized there were things we never talked about. Boundaries. Privacy. Self-respect. I had never had those conversations with him, not the way I should have. Maybe because no one had ever had them with me. Maybe because, deep down, I didn't know how. I had spent so many years being his mother that I never stopped to think about who I was outside of that. And now, with him gone, the loneliness crept in again. I had spent my entire adult life pouring myself into raising him, into making sure he never felt alone. But in doing that, I had made him the center of my world. I had let him fill the space that should have been mine to figure out. And maybe, just maybe, I had leaned on him in ways I shouldn't have. Not in a wrong way, but in a way that wasn't fair. Single parents talk about the bond they share with their children. It's different when it's just the two of you. The lines blur. The roles shift. And sometimes, without even realizing it, you rely on them emotionally in ways they're not meant to handle. Had I done that to Vincent? Had I made him feel responsible for something that was never his to carry? The thought made my stomach twist. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, turning it all over in my mind. Should I talk to him? Should I bring it up and try to explain the things even I didn't fully understand? Or would silence be the kinder option? Would speaking about it only make it worse? I didn't have the answer. All I knew was that something had changed. And I didn't know how to fix it. I avoided it for as long as I could. For days, I told myself that time would smooth over the discomfort, that maybe Vincent had already put it behind him. But deep down, I knew better. I could feel it, that invisible wall between us, the way our conversations felt forced, the way his voice had lost its usual warmth when he called to check in. We had never been like this before. And I hated it. So, I decided it had to be done. The next time Vincent came over to help with the final move, I waited until the boxes were loaded into the truck and until there were no more distractions left between us. Then, as he stood in the doorway, ready to leave, I spoke the words I had been avoiding. "Vincent, can we talk for a minute?" He hesitated, his fingers tightening around the strap of his bag, his expression unreadable. But then he nodded, stepping back inside. I motioned for him to sit, and for the first time in a long time, I felt nervous in my own home. I took a slow breath. "I love you," I started, my voice steady but soft. "And I want you to know that nothing could ever change that. But something about the other night. It's been on my mind. And I have a feeling it's been on yours too." He stiffened slightly, his eyes dropping to his hands. I just think we should talk about it, I continued. Because pretending it didn't happen doesn't feel right either. A long silence stretched between us. I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped lightly against his knee like he was trying to focus on anything but this conversation. Then, finally, he exhaled. I don't know what to say, he admitted. I feel weird about it. And I guess I feel ashamed. His voice was quiet, almost like he was afraid to say the words out loud. I nodded, letting his words settle between us. I understand, I said. And I don't want you to feel ashamed, Vincent. I just think maybe this is something we need to acknowledge so we can move forward. We've always been close, but maybe there are things we never really set boundaries around. Maybe I didn't do enough to make those things clear. His brow furrowed slightly. What do you mean? I sighed, choosing my words carefully. I mean that I've spent so many years being your mother, but I never really thought about the kind of personal space you needed as you grew older. I think, in some ways, I blurred the lines without meaning to. And I think that might have made things harder for both of us. He didn't respond right away, but I could see something shift in his expression. Like he was considering what I had said, turning it over in his mind. I guess I never thought about it like that, he murmured. But, yeah, maybe you're right. Another pause. Then, he let out a short, nervous laugh. This is awkward, huh? I smiled despite everything. Yeah, it is. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking at me for the first time since we sat down. I don't want things to be weird between us. Me neither, I said. Which is why I think we should promise to be more open with each other. Not about everything, not in a way that invades each other's space, but in a way that makes it okay to talk about things when we need to. He nodded slowly as if weighing the idea in his mind. Yeah, I think that's fair. And just like that, the tension eased. The wall between us didn't disappear completely, but I could feel the first cracks forming, the first signs that, maybe, we could find our way back to normal. Whatever that meant now. After Vincent left that evening, I sat in the quiet house, letting everything settle. The conversation had gone better than I expected, maybe even better than I deserved. But as I sat there, staring at the half-empty room, I realized something. This wasn't just about one uncomfortable moment. It wasn't even about Vincent. It was about me. About the way I had built my life around my son. About the spaces I had never let myself fill. Relationships change. They have to. Children grow up. Parents step back. The dynamic shifts, whether we want it to or not. But I had spent so much time clinging to the past, to the closeness we once shared, that I hadn't allowed space for that change to happen naturally. And the truth was, I had been afraid of what my life looked like without Vincent at the center of it. That wasn't fair to him. It wasn't fair to me, either. I ran my fingers along the edge of a cardboard box, thinking about how much life had happened inside these walls. The first day I brought Vincent home from the hospital. The nights were spent rocking him back to sleep after bad dreams. The countless meals, the conversations, the years of growing and learning and figuring out life together. This house had seen everything. But now it was time to go. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past settle in my bones. Emotional wounds are funny that way. If you don't talk about them, if you don't face them, they don't just disappear. They manifest in other ways, sometimes in silence, sometimes in tension, sometimes in the way you hold on too tightly to something that was never meant to stay the same. I had spent years ignoring my own needs, telling myself that being a good mother meant always putting Vincent first. But being a good mother also meant knowing when to step back, when to set boundaries, and when to focus on my own life instead of using my son to fill a space I had refused to acknowledge. It was time for me to start again. Not just in a new house, but in a new way of living. I found a new way of seeing myself, not just as Vincent's mother, but as a person who still had growing to do, healing to do. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Change never is. But I owed it to both of us to try. So, as I taped up the last of the boxes, I made a promise to myself to set healthier boundaries, to stop running from the conversations that mattered, to fill my own life instead of waiting for someone else to do it for me. And most importantly, to keep learning, to keep growing, and to keep moving forward. Because that's what life is. A series of moments. Some good, some painful, some that shake you so deeply you're never quite the same afterward. But the only thing you can do, the only thing any of us can do, is take what we've learned and keep going. One step at a time. If my story resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to stay updated, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in my next video.